with Shedeur Sanders, I thought it was kind of wild that people were so upset that, according to the report, Mary Kay Cabot had it in Cleveland.com. It got picked up by the New York Post, is where a lot of the traction came from. But it was from Mary Kay's article in Sunday. People got so mad that Shedeur is being mentored by Deshaun Watson. And it seems like Deshaun Watson is doing a good job of basically teaching Shedeur Sanders and teaching Dillon Gabriel and kind of taking those guys under his wing. And I don't understand, Spencer, where the frustration, I know where the frustration comes from. That's a dumb comment. But I don't understand why people would be so quick to say Deshaun can't help out Shedeur or Dillon in any capacity. Yeah. Like, you might think Deshaun is morally bankrupt. You might think he's an awful football player. That's a bad combo.
You might also think he's an awful person, too.
Well, that's where the morally bankrupt thing comes in, right? Like you might think a lot of bad things about Deshaun Watson, but Deshaun Watson legitimately did play the sport at an extremely high level. And if you think there's nothing that Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel can learn, then I can't help you. There's obviously things that Deshaun Watson can teach these guys.
Well, and one of the hardest things with Deshaun is that throughout this entire process and this entire ordeal and experience, we've never heard him give off a feeling of like remorse, if you will, like, if that makes sense. And some of that is just because he can't. Like, there still is this one outstanding case where like he can't talk about it. He can't like truly say his side of the story, whether people are going to believe him or not. And so because of that, like, he's never really shown like he's remorseful for anything. But that doesn't mean, like, I don't know what goes through his head. I don't know what he's learned from this entire thing. I would imagine that becoming like the NFL's like biggest villain is a learning experience that you could instill in somebody of like how to avoid that, or like what to do right or wrong in those situations, and how to try to, I think he does a poor job of blocking that stuff out, which is why he has a lot of the problems he still has, and why I think he just doesn't have it on the football field anymore, because I think mentally he's just broken. But there are learning experiences in that I think he can instill in somebody. And to your point, like, there's quarterbacking and football experiences that he can sort of instill in somebody. So I'm with you on this. Like, I understand that it's not the person you want mentoring a young quarterback for obvious reasons. But I think if you dig deeper than just like the surface level, like, why would the guy that got caught up in everything he got caught up in, went to, almost had to go to federal court for it, and have this entire ordeal that led to his demise in the NFL, be the guy that you want mentoring him? But I think there are lessons learned from him that he can at least instill in a young quarterback. And I think guys that are in that room, in the field together, in the rooms together, like in these with these teams, they understand that better than I think like a normal person would on the outside looking in.
I'm fascinated by the idea that the amount of people that got turned off by Deshaun Watson helping him out and taking on this mentorship role. It's just between Shedeur or Dillon Gabriel. I don't care where you get good advice from. I don't care where you get a good lesson from. You're telling me Deshaun can't teach them anything about being a quarterback? Like, I'm sorry. There just aren't that many people that have had the success. And I know it fell off for Deshaun, obviously. And you can say what you want about him in a personal level, and I won't disagree with much of it. But the point is, he knows a lot about the game of football. And even if he doesn't know a lot necessarily about the game of football, which I believe he does, he knows a lot about what it is to be a franchise quarterback, to be the person that has to go up to the podium after each game and be responsible for what happened during the game, and being able to talk that out. All these little things that a lot of people don't even consider. And so I just think turning away Deshaun in a moment where he wants to do something and give back in some way to the franchise that he has taken so much from financially and time-wise, I feel like, why don't we let him have a go at it?
This is one of those instances where I think everyone is so emotional and one way or the other on like Deshaun Watson, who he is, all that like, any little thing that comes up about him. We do this a lot in politics too, right? Like, you get like people get so entrenched in their side that like the second somebody on the other side does something that you think is like even small, very minimally controversial, like
politics analogies is a great way to limit the YouTube comments. By the way,
that's true.
Let's keep moving towards that.
But no, what I mean is like, you know how it goes. Like the second they do something that's like even the smallest bit controversial, like not even really controversial, they're just like they're ready to pounce and say like, I can't believe they did this. It's the same exact thing with Deshaun. Like the second Deshaun does anything, Deshaun walks down the street and looks at somebody the wrong way, and it's like, well, this guy, like it's just very hyperbolic. It's a very hyperbolic subject, very hyperbolic player. So I get it, but to me, I think people are making like a mountain out of a molehill here, because I feel the same way. Like, there's a lot that can be learned from his experience as a quarterback, from the experiences of just like being responsible, like you said, for the wins and losses of a team, and how you handle those pressures, how you go about your podium. When you're at the podium, what you say in a post-game press conference setting, all kinds of stuff. And I do think like this is a way Deshaun's making himself useful right now while he's here. And I can accept that. I think that's fine. I don't think it's really that big of a deal. The other thing I'll say too is like, if you're worried about him influencing Shedeur Sanders to be like, I don't know, some terrible person. Like I think Shedeur Sanders doesn't get enough credit for being more mature in terms of like the player that he is. I understand what the pushback here is going to be. It's going to be a bunch of people calling in and saying, you think Shedeur Sanders is mature when he's going 100 miles per hour on the highway? Like, okay, I'm fine. Like,
also don't care.
Everybody is immature to some degree, but I think like from the way he carries himself,
speeding cannot be the measurement of maturity, by the way.
Right. No, I agree. Because everybody pretty much does it. But from the way he carries himself, from the confidence he shows, from the way he already handles, I think, those press conference settings, like he comes off as a very mature person. And I think that's all a byproduct of the world and the aura he grew up in as Deion Sanders' son. Like he's already experienced these things. He is more mature than I think a lot of quarterbacks coming out of college because of the lifestyle that he had. And so I don't think that like potentially 1 year with Deshaun Watson, where he's like trying to just like help you and give you advice and things like that, is going to like ruin all that and throw that out the window. I also think too, like, he's openly talked about getting advice from Joe Flacco. Like,
oh no, so
it's all the quarterbacks.
I'm glad
like,
you
all
brought up
these
Flacco.
Guys are helping each other.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I'm glad you brought up Flacco because I was going to use him in a way, and you're right in that Shedeur has mentioned a relationship with Joe and how they get along. Yeah. But Joe is the one guy that in the preseason, or not preseason, but in minicamp was like, I'm not your role model, essentially. He did the Charles Barkley. Like, I'm not your role model. I'm not the one you have to look or get to look to for advice. Like, I'll help you if it's convenient and I'm around, but I'm not here to babysit, and I'm not here to do everything that's associated with that. So if he's taking himself off the board there, I don't want Kenny Pickett being the one to teach Shedeur Sanders. Dillon Gabriel can't teach Shedeur Sanders because they're both rookies. Like, if Deshaun Watson's the only one that is a player that has the experience, that has the accolades attached to what happened in his career and the good that he was doing in the early parts of his career, well, okay. Then open up your brain and figure it out. Like let's go with this.
I think all these quarterbacks can offer something in the way of mentorship to some degree. And the one thing I was saying, Flacco, is like, I don't think his overarching point, I think he gets lost in the sauce a little bit on what he said. I don't think it's that Flacco, to me, his point wasn't that like, he won't mentor anybody or he won't help other guys in the room, especially young guys. It was more so just that like he thinks that happens just kind of naturally by being in the room around each other. He's not going to go out of his way to do that though, because he's not like, he didn't get paid to come in here and just like, hey, you're here to mentor these young guys. He came in and tried to win the starting job.
During a practice, for instance, if they're using two different fields and you have two quarterbacks on one side and two quarterbacks on another, Shedeur can't look to Joe and be like, so what happened on that play?
We can't really look to Deshaun either.
Joe's doing his own.
Deshaun's over in the weight room.
Well, Joe's doing his own thing, though. You know what I mean? But like in this instance, I get
what you're saying. But yeah, I think there's something he can learn from all these quarterbacks. Even Kenny Pickett to a degree. Like Kenny had a bad experience in Pittsburgh. He's had to deal with like going somewhere else and trying to rehabilitate his image.
I'm of the belief that you can learn something from just about anybody.
Yeah,
like even someone as lost as I believe Kenny Pickett is. But who can offer more from a football standpoint and a teaching standpoint? I think Deshaun is and Flacco and
Deshaun.
Yeah, but again, we talked about the Flacco side of things. I'm not as convinced. I read it the same way you did. If teaching happens, it'll happen organically around Joe.
Right.
But Joe's not putting his arm around him and saying, hey, this is what I happen to see. Let's figure it out and let's diagnose it from here. Or, hey, here's a tip for when you go up against this or this or this. I just don't see that from Joe. Joe's dialed in on his own job, and that's fine. I don't begrudge him for that. 216-474-0092. Chris in Cleveland. What's up, Chris?
What's up, JP? Hey, how you fellas doing this evening?
Hey, Chris. What's up, man?
Chris, what's up?
Not too bad. I just don't want any setbacks. For football reasons, the only reason I don't want Deshaun coaching him up or anything like that. Look, this is Stefanski's offense. One, he didn't like Stefanski's offense. He didn't like being under center, and he held onto the ball too long. One of the things with Shedeur, one of the nicks on Shedeur was the fact that he holds onto the ball too long. A lot of that had to do with the offensive line he had. So as far as for football reasons, I don't think it's anything that he could teach him as far as on the field, because he didn't like Stefanski's offense anyway, and he didn't like two of the things that's necessary. I think one of the things you said, JP, with what's his name, is that he does get rid of the ball quicker, as far as for leadership. So I don't want Deshaun holding him back by teaching them things that's not good towards Stefanski's offense. That can hold him back some. That's all I'm thinking.
All right, I got you. And thanks, Chris. I appreciate you, man. That's a fair point. I mean, again, this goes – I don't want Deshaun and Shedeur to be best buddies and them holding hands side by side. And then when Shedeur gets in a game, looking over to Deshaun to be like, was that right? Was that good? But I also think opening your eyes and opening whatever you can be receptive to that Deshaun would offer up here and there isn't the end of the world either.
I guess I would understand it more too if it was like we heard stories about like, well, hey, they're going out clubbing together and like doing all this stuff. But this, from all we can, all we can deem at this point is when they're at the practice facility and they're in the quarterback room and they're working on stuff individually or as a team or as a group, like whatever. When they're around each other in a football setting, Deshaun is kind of helping mentor him. And I don't have a problem with that. I think we're just making a mountain out of a molehill.
There's got to be value there when it comes to Deshaun. And it might be looked at as a quasi-coach type role, but you're paying him $46 million. If you can get something like this that I actually do think is valuable, why am I going to turn that down and shut it down just because he didn't look good in a Browns uniform and comes with some questionable things elsewhere?